listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
All right, we're here, October 2021, Halloween month to many of us, including me. So what better way to kick things off with something I'm calling Fright Friday, because on today's show I'm talking to Caroline Williams, star of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and also the great new horror movie 10 Minutes to Midnight, which is available to rent, stream or buy now wherever you watch your films. Caroline is an absolute badass, no doubt, and was a lot of fun to talk to her from her home out in California. She has had an amazing career and journey through the movie industry, but her own story before acting came along is pretty eventful too, which she shares with me in this chat. I found that my own childhood of spending summers in the US often comes into these conversations, and this talk is no different, so I hope you can all humour me whenever this comes up, because it's a big part of who I am and I always enjoy revisiting it. Caroline and I cover some great stuff, including her time spent growing up in the South during an incredibly volatile period in American history, through to moving to Texas, where she would begin her movie career and land the role of Stretch in the infamous sequel to Tobe Hooper's iconic Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Both films to this day are surefire classics, and Part 2 is such a fun but nasty film experience. It will be on this film she'd worked with Dennis Hopper, who she shares some fun stories about, and we also discuss her love of music and our previous guest Wednesday 13, who has a couple of songs featured in the recent film 10 Minutes to Midnight. She also has some strong opinions on how women of a certain age are viewed in the movie industry, which is a really important subject. If you'd like to learn more about Caroline, her films and convention appearances, then please visit carolinewilliamsactress.com, where you'll find loads of great stuff, including links to all her social media and lots of cool signed merchandise. And as we are now into October and Halloween is looming, Straight to Video are back with our annual Halloween tune. In the past, we've covered classic horror tracks such as Pet Sematary, Scream Until You Like It from Ghoulies 2, and also Good Times from the Lost Boys. But this year, I've tackled Trick or Treat by the band Fastway from the 1986 horror movie of the same name, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Also on the track is Jacob A.M. from Stop Stop, doing some great vocals. My buddy Rob Wild from Midnight City laid down the rhythm guitars and backing vocals. Johnny Monaco from Enough's Enough served up a killer guitar solo, and Nat Webb once again delivered the goods, not only playing the drums but producing, mixing and mastering. This is available to stream and download for free from stvpod.com, or check out the cool video which is on YouTube, and I'd love to know what you think. And as ever, I want to thank Dead Skull Coffee for supporting this show by offering you, the listener, 15% off their ground or full bean coffee from their independent rock and roll coffee company. Just enter the discount code STV on checkout when you fill your basket over at deadskullcoffee.co.uk. And also a shout to everyone over on the Straight to Video Patreon for their wonderful continued support. If you would like to get extra involved in this show too, then please head on over to patreon.com/STVpod for all the info. Alright, let's get into this, because Caroline Williams was on great form and had a lot to say, which I think you're going to enjoy hearing about. So, without further ado, let's kick off Halloween in style with my straight to video chat with Caroline Williams.
My mom used to play the radio while I fell asleep. Usually she'd turn it off once I conked out, but sometimes she'd forget. And there you were. These final steps. You know, whenever I heard your voice, I knew it was so far past my bedtime. Just felt like I was getting away with something.
I am the one who convinced Bob to give you one last show.
You got bit by a wild animal tonight. Who knows what kind of diseases those things are carrying?
You sure you're not seeing anything, Amy? Anything that's not really there?
Dude, it is so easy this way, man. It is so easy. I was doing a thing with some people yesterday, and you had to have Chrome, and you got to have headphones, and you got to have all this stuff. Are you fucking kidding me? I've got a 4th generation iPad.
Yes.
It's like, I may as well have a tin can and a string.
And all the way to the UK as well. No worries.
Listen, I'm dying to get over there, man.
Yeah, you should be doing... Well, no one's been doing any conventions for the last 18 months, but yeah, you should be over here.
Dude, Triple vaxxed, motherfucker.
Triple? How do you do triple?
Well, at my age, which is soon to be 65 as of March, they give you certain dispensations. It's like, ooh, she's old. We better make sure she lives. I got my first one. I got my follow-up. After 6 months, they'll let you get a booster. And I am Moderna. And Moderna is the best performing of all the vaccines.
You are bulletproof.
Listen, when you have raised children and they've gone through elementary school and, there's all kinds of stuff coming out of them and they're coughing and it's hideous. They're like monsters made of mucus is what they are. And once you've experienced that in life, you will never be ill. You will never be sick. Plus, I am a vax slut. When it comes to the flu, the regular flu vaccine, I think for the last 20 years, I've gotten a spring and a fall every single year because it's always mutating and changing the flu virus. So they're always changing the formula. So, going into this whole COVID thing, I already kind of knew that, but I can tell you, I've been in a couple convention environments so far. I've been in a couple red carpet premiere environments, parties. I've been to a million places. That's where I am with that shit. I'd love to get on a plane and fly over there because I've got so many friends over there that I would love to see. And I would love to sign. Our film, 10 Minutes to Midnight, performed like a champ in the UK this year. We didn't get as much press or reviews, frankly, in the US. I was really surprised, but our UK performance was outstanding. And the UK fans and festivals were outstanding.
We love our horror over here.
Oh, man. I think it's because part of the reason horror fans are different there than here is you have an ancient culture. This is where civilization was born. This is where the Magna Carta was written. This is where it kind of started in a way. Mass communication started. And the ghostly stories, my family are from England. My grandmother was English. They were from Paynton and they were Chapins. So all the Chapins in the US are related. But the ghost stories, the belief in ghosts, just the idea that ghosts are a part of our universe and our world. I mean, like angels, it's just a part of the thing.
Definitely. It's in the culture. Definitely. We just kind of dive straight in then. Thank you for doing this for me, this chat. I appreciate it.
I hope you were recording.
So if it's cool just to trace your journey a little bit, I do want to talk about 10 Minutes to Midnight and current projects and stuff.
10 Minutes to Midnight, I feel like my life came full circle with that film. And it came to me solely by accident because it was first offered to Barbara Crampton. Barbara was committed to something else, couldn't do it, said to Eric Bloomquist, the filmmaker, this was written for Caroline Williams. You need to call Caroline Williams. And he did. From the moment we got on FaceTime together, we started planning the wardrobe. It just boom right out of the box. I would say that it was reminiscent of Chainsaw 2, but the characters are so dramatically different, not just because of the regional influence, because Amy Marlowe's very East Coast, Stretch was very Texan. So there was a huge cultural gulf. But the ages of those characters and, age and women in any kind of media, doesn't really matter what it is. Age and women is a dodgy business because unlike men and I'm not doing a big feminist thing because I'm not really that person. I'm more of a humanist. I'm less of a feminist. I like the whole universe of everything. Clint Eastwood, 91, celebrated, making films. The guy's a fucking rock star. Women, not quite so much. You're not reading a lot of stuff about Karen Kusama or Catherine Bigelow or some of the major female names in directing films. There are a lot of young women who are up and coming, but the women who've been in the game and doing it at the top of their game, you would never know that a Catherine Bigelow or Karen Kusama film wasn't made by a guy. You wouldn't know it. Catherine Hardwicke from the Twilight series of films and other films. She's not known just for Twilight. The best female filmmakers to me choose stories that are not so identity specific that everybody in the audience can't relate to what's going on, But women of a certain age and a young woman, it's a very different game. And the fact that we got to explore every single angle of that older woman running out of time, running out of options, running out of choices.
It's a very original take, especially in a horror environment as well.
Completely. the vampire vehicle was also really, really smart. These two guys, Eric Bloomquist and Carson Bloomquist, they're brothers. They're like the Coen brothers. They're like the Safdie brothers. When you have read interviews about these guys, they finish each other's sentences. They're the same soul. They're like twins. And that's the way the Bloomquist brothers are. And they're productive. Oh my God. Bang, right out of the box. Once 10 Minutes was out there and catching fire a little bit, they were onto their next project, and they're just rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. So it's an exciting atmosphere also to be a part of. But the fact that these two young men wrote this story about this older woman aging out, being aged out, this is a term you hear on the convention circuit all the time. The interesting thing is those of us from the 80s are the ones who are actually working and getting interesting and great content compared to the rest of the entertainment world.
Yeah, it's interesting because horror's in like a good position for that. Because like you say, you've got the Bloomquist, you've got people like Adam Green who are fans of the 80s genre of horror, grew up watching people like yourself. So they're making these films now, and it's cool to have people who they looked up to in the films, but also introducing you to a whole new generation. It's an exciting position to be in, I think.
I think it's the best. And the thing that's great about horror that really is attractive, they're action films. As you grow older, you're the grandmother or you're the mom, and you talk and you look worried. And that's pretty much the game. I'm not interested in that. Those are not the things. I turn down the mom things, and it's always a mom thing, almost always a mom thing. And strangely enough, I get a lot of mom things and a lot of nuclear family things from women writers. I think there's a lot of unresolvedness with younger women about marriage and family. And do I go there? How do you incorporate it? It's a very real choice that women have to make. Men frequently not so much, but it's becoming more of one because I'm meeting more and more men who don't want to get married and they don't want to have children. And it's hard to be a mom. It's hard to lose your place in line and try to find it again. That's hard.
Almost like starting again, I guess, at some point.
Oh, it is.
Especially how fast everything moves these days. Take your foot off the gas for that second.
I mean, I'm still starting a little bit, partly because I do believe I'm at a point in my life where I do need to make choices. I've never really been one of those actors who does every single thing that's offered or does every single thing because a friend offered it to me. And I love my friends, but, everybody's got their own way.
When did you learn to say no?
Oh, boy. After a screening of a film, I did kind of as a favor to a friend. The original concept was great. And then I saw it. And it's always something that you're contending with. There have been other films that are all-star casts and every single figure in horror is in the film. And then they see it. And then it's not good. And the thing is, at that point, you do have to make the choice. Do I cuddle up to this thing that makes me look bad? Or do I just simply move on, say nothing, and just move on? And that's usually what you have to do. I mean, everybody's doing the best they can do, but not everybody has the same skill level or the same natural gifts. And you can't just smile and nod your way through that.
For sure. If it's all right, just to trace your journey just a little bit. The first few years of your movie career were in your home state of Texas before coming out to the West Coast. But where was it you were actually born and raised? Was it, have I got this right? Is it Rusk County, like to the east of Dallas? Damn it!
The beauty of IMDb, people are always coming on my account that are not me, and they edit all kinds of things that they think they know, and it's nearly never true. 95% of what you see on my IMDb is inaccurate.
Wow.
Yeah. They've got the bio and they've got the film list, kind of okay, but everything else is absolutely not true.
Where does Jackson, Mississippi come into your story then?
Jackson, Mississippi was a very unusual interlude. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Most of my family were from there. I was born in 1957 in Little Rock, Arkansas. That's the year that Central High School was desegregated by the 101st Airborne Division. And it did take an army. So the racial war, the war to end racial segregation was real. For whatever reason, my dad thought, ooh, things are really burning up around here. We better go to Jackson, Mississippi. So we went to Jackson, Mississippi in 1963 and escaped in 1969. And it was such a definitive time in the nation's history. And I got to see a complete metamorphosis within my own family. Some people made the change, some did not. My dad was infinitely more racist and bigoted than my mother. My mother very much not, but I'm not going to pretend that she crossed the bridge at Selma. She wasn't out marching and waving signs and doing those things. She was terrified. Everybody was terrified. My father was a traveling salesman. Monday through Friday, we were alone. And because my mother had a Black housekeeper come to our house every couple of weeks, and the Black housekeeper would bring her children, and they were my age. We were the same age. We were instructed to play in the backyard or inside where no one could see us. I mean, these people were, Black people were losing their jobs. They were being completely isolated and segregated. And because this was happening, my mother got threats because she refused to fire her. And that was like a big move. I know how all this sounds while we're talking about it. It sounds very colonial and hoop skirts and picking cotton and all that stuff. You know what? That's the nation's history. That's the cultural evolution that human beings have to go through to make it to the next stage of civilization if you want to keep your civilization. That's what you have to do. So it was a very fraught and awful and scary and awful time. And bombs were going off and murders were happening. And, the civil rights workers were murdered in Neshoba County and buried in a levee by law enforcement, by the guys who were the sheriff. I think his name was Cecil Price. I can't remember, but I think that was the guy's name. And the talk, everybody talking about this stuff. Everybody knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And the defining moment was my dad said, we got to get out of here. We got to go where this isn't happening. Because my father's company he was working for were all Klansmen. They needed my father to join them. Because if he's not going to join them, well, you're either with us or you're against us. And you know what happens to white people who are against us. And I remember my father saying to my mother they have those late night conversations and the kids are supposed to be asleep. I remember my father saying, Sue, I might be a bigot, but I'm not a murderer. And that was the choice. That was the choice. That was real. That happened. And I know how it sounds. And it's so ugly and it's so awful. But it's just the truth. And you have to square the truth. You have to square the truth. So we moved to Houston, Texas, we may as well have landed in Oz.
Only reason I ask about the Jackson, Mississippi thing is that my dad lives in Vicksburg, Mississippi. He's lived over there since the late 70s.
Oh my God!
When I go to visit him, the nearest airport is Jackson. So I was like, holy crap.
And we used to go up and down the Yazoo River fishing in a boat in Vicksburg. And the Windsor Castle ruins, that's what they used to call them, the Windsor ruins, which was part of a beautiful plantation. And all that was left was like part of the slab and some pillars, I think. I mean, the juxtaposition of the South, and Black people know this too. I have a lot of Black friends who are also from the South, deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, places like that. It's a complete paradox and contradiction. And as you grow up in that environment, you learn to assimilate that into your reality. And I don't think that's a bad thing because that's where the truth lies. And you've got to be able to see the truth clearly. You really do. And my bond with my Southern Black friends is very real because we share that truth.
You've seen it and understand it. And
yeah.
So how was Houston when you moved there then?
Oh,
what kind of environment was that?
It had a level of sophistication and cultural progress that I had never experienced. It is a fully integrated society. In the neighborhood we moved into, there were Mexican families who were better off than we were, by the way, Black families, Asian families. It was the frickin' United Nations. Everybody's gathering for block parties. Everybody's hanging out. It was a totally different environment. I went from being a little girl wearing petticoats and little keds to I'm around girls wearing heels and stockings and IUDs. And whoa, I mean, this was late 1969, segueing into 1970. So, boy, I had a lot of catching up to do. And I did.
Excellent.
My mom said within 2 weeks, you were just like everybody else.
That's it. When you're that young, you're just a sponge, just absorbing everything and want to be part of everything.
That's when I became an actor.
Yeah?
Yep.
Was music and movies always an important thing for you? Because like Texas in particular has got a great music heritage.
So many more. The up-and-comers at that time were Willie Nelson and Linda Ronstadt. She was still out in California, but, that Texas scene was assimilating that style of music. Waylon Jennings, B.W. Stevenson, Rusty Weir. The Texas scene was unique and individual to itself, true to itself. Angela Straley, the blues, the Vaughan brothers, Jimmy and Stevie Ray Vaughan. It was such an exciting time, things that I'd never heard before. Also, the rock scene was so great. I mean, you had Led Zeppelin and you had the bigs, the Rolling Stones were bigger and better than ever. The Beatles were going through their weird journey. And movies, that era in the movies was so well defined. I wasn't exposed to those things in a Southern environment. The Bible Belt had a real tight cinch, around everything. And I am not denigrating Christian religion. I love Christian philosophy. I'm Jewish, but I love Christian philosophy. The best people I know strive the hardest to live spiritually centered lives, all kinds of belief systems. But at that time, they were still trying to really control the way you think. And the beauty of Texas, it was wide open. It was a rodeo. You could get on a pony and ride and go look where you're going. You could just go.
Because didn't you sing and play in a couple of bands growing up?
I still do. And I know that sounds weird, but I've got some friends on the music scene. They're a lot younger than me, but in many ways they're older than me because they've been exposed to every bit of my cultural heritage. And they've had a chance to study it and analyze it and immerse themselves in it. They're some of the oldest people I've ever. Britton Buchanan, one of the most exciting songwriters, singers on the scene. He was on The Voice maybe a couple of seasons ago. The guy is a powerhouse, and he is about to make some heavy moves into the writing scenario. My friend Kelly Kidd is going to break big in the country music scene. My friend Red Carter is basically just a Grammy winner waiting to be discovered. My guitar playing friend Ace Von Johnson, one of my favorite bands, Wednesday 13, who has music in the 10 Minutes to Midnight movie, Bury Your Dead, Bisto Blanco, all these bands, so many of my favorite bands across the musical spectrum. Music is still an integral part of my life. And Britton and my friends have been kind enough to help me get my voice back and start singing again and, finding my own style. So at some point I'll be recording some stuff and we'll be doing some stuff on video and breaking it out there and it'll be fun.
Excellent, excellent. Was there a particular event that led you to think about seriously moving forward to see if there was something in the movie world that you could pursue? Was it something encouraged in school or what was the spark for that?
I did some school things, but I got mixed up with an outfit called Clear Concepts Productions. It was a production company. They provided production services for runaway productions from other parts of the world and LA because Houston was becoming a hub. This was just in advance of Urban Cowboy and Terms of Endearment and a lot of big movies, award winners, As that scene began to grow, I got a lot more exposure to the film community in Houston, got a lot of encouragement to jump in and join them. And nearly immediately, I started taking classes. I was doing voiceover, auditioned for Louis Malle for a movie called Alamo Bay with Ed Harris and Amy Madigan. And I got cast immediately. Yeah, we shot that in Corpus Christi and changed my life. That put me on the map. At minimum, put me on the map regionally so that whenever there were casting opportunities with the major players who would come into town, I was always on those lists.
What did your parents think about the direction of you wanting to go into movies?
It was the culture. They didn't like the music scene. They didn't like the movie scene. They wanted me to have a more structured, traditional style of life. They were unfamiliar with all that other stuff. They knew it existed, but that it was never a part of their growing up or their knowledge.
It's a dream scenario, isn't it? Especially back then.
And the things they would read about film culture and music culture and things like that. It was, no.
But from there, you landed a part in one of my favourite films, Legend of Billie Jean. I love that film.
I also did a funny little film. It started out called Hostage Dallas. And then they named it something else. And I can't remember what it was, but I played opposite Joe Don Baker. I had a great time on that one. It's just, I started getting busier. But Legend of Billie Jean, to this day, that movie resonates so heavily with me. And it's so contemporary. Fair is fair. There isn't anybody who can't get behind that hashtag.
It's brilliant. I didn't see it till years later. It was always one of the films in the video store. Then probably about 10 years ago, I saw it. This film's great. And it's always great when those 80s films hold up with fresh eyes. It's brilliant on first viewing. It's awesome.
What I liked about the 80s is it was almost a petri dish for the times we live in now. The similarities are, whoa, wow. Look at everything we were contending with then and everything we're contending with now, and there's not a lot of difference.
So 1986 rolls around and the audition for Chainsaw 2 came up. Was that held in Texas?
It was. And the thing is, they auditioned, gosh, probably about 450 women between Los Angeles and New York. But they were already set up in Texas and they were ready to go. It was like, Gone with the Wind and the Burning of Atlanta, we don't have our Scarlet, and they didn't have their Stretch. And Toby was pretty insistent. He and Kit both, being from Texas, knew they wanted a Texas girl because a Texas girl is different from any other girl anywhere else. Really is. So they held their auditions, and, it's one of those stories. All the pages were action pages. They weren't dialogue pages. I could see what it was they wanted. So I ran screaming down the hallway outside the audition room, and I busted into the room, and I got down on my hands and knees, and I pulled the chairs out from under Toby and Kit, and I piled them up by the door and backed into the corner saying, "They live on fear, they live on fear." And it was one of those electrically charged moments in the room.
What was their reaction? Was there a bit of silence for a while?
Well, they didn't have any place to sit. I mean, they were just standing there. So they just walked closer and closer and closer to me until they were standing right in front of me. And I knew, barring Canon Films saying, "No, we want the actress from, this other Canon film," I knew I'd made a strong impression. That's the only thing you can hope for. If you're an actor, go into the audition process as you're working the material. You're becoming a better actor. You're delivering a finished product that someone might want to buy. Maybe not even these people, but take the audition onus off of you. Take that pressure off. Take that off. Go in and work that material as though it's your first day at work. It's work, and that's what you're doing.
How much attention was you showing to the horror genre at that point? Because this was as things were kind of beginning to reach their peak with like anti-heroes and horror sequels and the slasher genre.
Not that many horror films beyond the little indie, I'm a guy who thinks I can make a movie. There weren't that many that fell in front of me when I was coming up. Everything that I was reading for, honestly, were studio things. Runaway production from LA, runaway production from Europe. And those movies were a lot less horror oriented. They were a little more traditional in their outlook. So when Chainsaw fell in front of me, that was 13 years after the first. And Toby Hooper was directing it. And that's what told me, if you can get this is an ideal thing to get because it's Toby Hooper. That's what made all the difference.
Did you enjoy being on such a cool set? I mean, it's a pretty epic set. All the different, from the radio station to the whole underground thing. And in Texas too.
Our production designer, Kerry White, he has had and has an illustrious and wonderful career. He created these alternative worlds that we got to work and live in. From building the radio station, the underground lair that was, in fact, the press room for the Austin American-Statesman newspaper, 3 stories high, cavernous. It was like an airplane hangar and gigantic. And he sprayed the entire interior down with gunite, which is what they put on swimming pools or used to. Turned it into a massive cave. And he dressed every single square inch of that environment, even the things you couldn't see, because he knew we could see it. And it was a playground. I mean, all we did every day was play. All we did was play.
How was it working alongside someone like Dennis Hopper? That must have been a thrill. Do you constantly soak up influence from people like that, being around them?
It was the first time I'd been exposed, other than Joe Don Baker, and Ed Harris and Amy Madigan, but Ed and Amy were very method style actors. Didn't really hang around much with me, but with Dennis, I actually spent personal time with him. We went to dinner. I took him to a well-known jazz club in Austin to hear a phenomenal saxophone player named Kirk Whalum, who's from Houston, who's amazing. And of course, I told him we're going to see Kirk Whalum, and he goes, I'm best friends with Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis. And, he's naming all these. It's like, those are his friends. I said, you know what? You will like Kirk Whalum as much as you like those guys. And the next day we get on the set and he goes, yeah, I'm a little tired. I took Caroline to meet a friend of mine named Kirk Whalum who plays the set. So that was kind of Dennis. But you know what? Listen, he taught me everything I know about acting for the camera. I had never learned acting for the camera. It's different. You have to have a different consciousness of what the lighting scheme is, what lens is on the camera, what areas in the set are being covered, entering, exiting. It's different. It's different. The camera records your performance in a different way than an audience just using their brains does sitting in a theater and having a theatrical experience. So that was priceless. And I'll tell you, the scene on the steps was constructed and staged the way it was for camera. Originally, we weren't going to be on the camera left side. We were going to be camera right side. And he said, you know what? Her face looks better from over there. Let's flip this. And that's how that went.
That's amazing. Didn't he champion you in the industry afterwards?
I moved to town nearly immediately because we wrapped on July 4th. We were in the theaters August 29th. That's a quick turnaround.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that fast.
Yeah, that fast. So for me to be in the game, I had to move to LA and I didn't have representation. And I came out to town and I did manage to get the casting director who got me hired on the film had made some appointments for me. I went on them. They didn't take me on. I run into Dennis one night at a popular joint in town and he asked me how things are going. And I said, oh, they kind of suck. I don't have an agent. He goes, I'll walk you into my agent.
What a legend.
And so I was, kind of, is this going to happen? But he walked me into the artist agency and he introduced me to his agent and said, you need to represent this girl. And that's how I got my first agent. Very, very generous. Now, I am going to say he came on to me. I kind of thought, wow, he came on to me. We were sitting at the restaurant table. We had gone to dinner one night. We're sitting at the restaurant table and he goes, so Caroline, he's rearranging his place setting on the table. So Caroline, how do you feel about recreational sex? And I started rearranging my place setting on the table. And I looked at him and I said, well, Dennis, with you, I don't think about it at all.
How did that go down?
He laughed. We had a laugh and we went on and had a lovely evening. The man was filled with stories. It almost felt like when he did that, it was perfunctory. It's like she expects me to come on to her. She expects this. Because, Hollywood in the 60s and 70s, it was a free-for-all. Everything was a free-for-all. When I was in high school, it was a free-for-all in the sexual arena. You just kind of romped and played and did what you wanted, and there you are. But, I didn't take offense. I think that's probably the closest I've ever come to a Me Too moment. I've certainly had a lot of flirtations. I've certainly had a lot of clear sexual interest from men and from one woman, but I just kind of, blew it off and didn't, I don't know. I didn't have anything awful happen to me knocking. I didn't have anything awful. Might have been annoying, but it wasn't awful.
Props to Dennis for you shut him down like that. And he was like, okay, let's just get on with the evening.
I know. He was just so totally nonplussed about the whole thing. And, just like I said, the stories about George Stevens, Rock Hudson, Elizabeth Taylor, his dear friend, Jimmy Dean, who's his acting style. James Dean appropriated a European acting style, partly because of the influence of Pier Angeli, a woman that he had dated, and the influences of so many other Europeans in the Hollywood community when he was coming up and becoming a popular and sought after actor. And his relationship with Nick Ray, one of my favorite directors ever in Hollywood, who is considered to be a failure by people in Hollywood, but not by me. Just that golden era that he was so very much a part of that.
Just to touch back on Chainsaw 2 a little bit, much like the original, I didn't see the film for some time afterwards because those films were banned in the UK.
I remember doing a signing in Germany where this was categorized with child porn and Nazi memorabilia. And I pulled out my handy pocket constitution, which I carry with me constantly, and I read the First Amendment aloud. And it is so all-encompassing and yet simple. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our Constitution. I think it matters. So I think that's super fucked up, man.
Yeah. And again, going back to my dad in Mississippi, because the films were banned in the UK, it wasn't until 3 or 4 years later I got to rent them in the US. So even though Chainsaw 2 has a lot of fun comedic elements, because it had been banned in the UK, it still had some real danger for me as a 15-year-old kid. But particularly your early scenes with Bill Moseley, all that tension which is building in the radio station, that's still a masterclass. I love it. It's great.
I very deliberately avoided any kind of extended contact with him. I would see Bill being made up and being on the set and things like that, but we hadn't had our scene in the office. We hadn't done the tour yet. So I wanted to save that. I wanted that moment to be as real as it could be. And I think that's why it works so well, is we were not familiar with each other. And he was able to take advantage of me in any way emotionally that he wanted to. Savored the fear. He savored the shock and made use of it.
Brilliant stuff. So moving out to LA shortly after Chainsaw 2, this was like the late 80s. Was you able to embrace and experience any of the live music scene that was exploding out of the Sunset Strip? Was you into all that?
Oh, of course. And not only that, I did have a very busy career at that time. So I was meeting so many people who were into so many different bands, films, literature, art, sculpture, you name it. And at that point, the whole horror community was sort of beginning to firm up their alliances. And the influences of all those things, the creation of the horror universe was happening in that moment. Because today, we have a very well-defined film community, and it does have art, sculpture, painting, music, literature. We have our own little world, fashion, and all of that was just being born when I came out here. So it was fun to be a part of the creation of all that stuff. I did a lot of television as well that was not horror related. So I alternated between the worlds.
Was you able to go to any of the clubs at that time, or was you just too busy working?
That was another fabulous Dennis thing. Dennis's good friend, Jack Nicholson, had funded a nightclub called Helena's, and it was the scene, place to see and be seen. Jack was always there. Warren Beatty was always there. Every hot actor from the 70s was always there. And Helena co-starred with Jack Nicholson in Five Easy Pieces. And George Michael was always there. I remember being there one night after NXS had their concert, and they showed up. They played NXS all night long, and we threw our leather jackets in the center of the dance floor, and we just went in a circle, for hours. It was amazing. But all the big stars from that era hung out at Helena's, and Dennis made sure I had a membership.
Where was that located?
It was in the Rampart district. I don't even know if the building is still there anymore. It was a cinder block building, very simple. It had a retractable canvas roof so that when it rained, they would roll the canvas out and the rain would fall along the outer perimeter of the building. But when the weather was nice, they would roll that back and you could see the starry sky. And on cold evenings, with everybody dancing and the place packed with people, the steam would come rising out of the top of the building, and it looked like hell.
You've worked on so many cool projects over the years, but you've also worked with one of my favourite actors, Robert Russler, a couple of times in Tales of Halloween and Blood Feast. Have you two been friends for a long time?
We have so many just basic integral values in common, even beyond the acting game. But as an actor, his integrity as an actor is unshakable. When that man is in the moment, he is in the frickin' moment, and you leave his ass alone. I just cherish every moment that I've gotten to share with him on screen. He's made me a better actor, and Blood Feast was an indelible experience. We really enjoyed ourselves. In Tales of Halloween, he was ready to play and goof around and have fun. The guy is at 1,000%. I just can't say enough about him.
Have you ever done a convention with him? I met him at a convention one time, and he was just the best.
He's the best. He loves to play. He will play. Not everybody likes that.
And music has continued to be a constant in your career. And you said in recent years you've embraced a lot of the music you loved in the past, but it's also featured in a lot of your work as well. You've worked with Glenn Danzig and the Slayer Relentless Trilogy, Rob Zombie on Halloween 2, and having Wednesday 13 contribute music to 10 Minutes to Midnight. I know he was like a massive fan of yours. I think Chainsaw 2 was his first ever VHS, which he actually owned. I don't know if he's ever mentioned it to you.
Well, he was always a big fan, but once I discovered him, he came and introduced himself to me at a convention, and he gave me one of his CDs. And I listened to it, and I loved it. And people were playing it because we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where he's from. We were playing the music on the floor, and it was fantastic. We've become good friends since then. And when 10 Minutes to Midnight came down, I asked him, is there anything that you've got the publishing on that we could use for our film? And he gave me 2 songs.
Haven't you been on stage with him before?
Couple of times. He asked me if I would dress up as Stretch and do the little intro. And I said, hell yeah, I'll do it. I'll do the chainsaw dance. You got me.
The 15-year-old Wednesday 13 was like exploding inside.
All of us were. I mean, believe me, we're a mutual admiration society.
Where was that?
That was at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
If you're going to do it anywhere.
It's an institution here. I mean, that's since 1963. They have featured the Doors. They have featured everybody that you can think of.
Caroline, thank you ever so much for chatting with me. I've loved hearing your stories.
Thank you so much.
All righty, you take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And you as well. Thank you.
You're losing it, Amy. Everyone is saying so.
It's all you, Amy, I promise.
Strange thing, your last day. And anything, really. Everything's the same. Till it's not.
There you go. Big thanks to Caroline Williams for sharing her time and stories with me here in Halloween month on the Straight to Video podcast. Love chatting with her, and I urge you to go check out 10 Minutes to Midnight wherever you watch your new horror movies. Also, be sure to visit CarolineWilliamsActress.com for all the up-to-date info on what she is up to. And please go listen to the Straight to Video Halloween single Trick or Treat. It's free to stream and download from stvpod.com, and you can find the video there too or on YouTube. Any shares would be massive of you and truly mean a lot. Alright, that's all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thanks for continuing to come back for more, because while you do, I'm going to be here putting them out for you. So until we chat again, take care and speak soon.